Hi, good evening. Welcome. This is Pain to Power, and I am your host, Marya Kazmi, also known as Brown Girl Interrupting. This is the show where we turn our struggles into our strengths and we heal in community with new tools to take away. Please make sure, if you haven't done it yet, that you subscribe and you like this show and that you're joining us in the comments to share your thoughts as well. And so, have you ever wondered why so many students feel invisible in school? What if the problem isn't the students, but it's actually the culture that we've decided to count as learning? One of the things I think about often, both as an educator and as someone on a personal journey of healing, it's the role of culture playing a part in our lives. It shapes how we see the world, how we express ourselves, and how we connect to others. And yet, in so many spaces, especially in our education system, culture can become invisible. There are ways of learning, ways of speaking, and ways of showing knowledge that we've been taught to see as the right way to do school, the standard way, the neutral way. But the truth is, those ways are cultural too. And when only one way of being is recognized, so many other ways of thinking, creating, and expressing knowledge are left outside the room. And for many people, that absence becomes a quiet form of pain. This feeling that who you are, where you come from, or the culture that shaped you doesn't fully belong in spaces that are meant to educate and empower you. So, my own journey from the pain of experiences that disconnected me from myself to the work of healing and coming back home to who I am is what gave birth to this show, Pain to Power. It's about recognizing those moments of absence, challenge, or invisibility and transforming them into something that empowers not only ourselves, but others. And tonight's conversation brings us into a powerful example of how culture can become a pathway back to belonging. Hip hop culture is often misunderstood as just music, but for many people, it has always been much more than that. It is storytelling, it's identity, it is intellectual expression, it is community, it is resistance, it is a way of taking up space in a world that has often tried to silence many voices. Hip hop became a movement that allowed people to see themselves reflected in the world and, in doing so, claim their power. And what happens when that culture enters the classroom? When it becomes a tool not just for entertainment, but for education, connection, and empowerment. Well, tonight we're exploring that with an educator and teacher leader, Kenneth Smith. And what I'm really excited about is when I shared about this episode online, someone wrote something that really captured the essence of this work. The resilient leader said, "What Kenneth built isn't just a course, it's a correction, a signal to students that the institution finally sees what they already knew about themselves." And I think that speaks to something many of us in education are still learning to recognize, that students don't come into our classrooms empty. They come with culture, knowledge, identity, and ways of understanding the world that deserve to be seen and valued. Kenneth is a transformational educator and leader who is using everything from course design and pedagogy to relationship building and community to reshape how students experience learning. Through his work with hip hop studies, teacher leadership, and organizations like Bond, he's also guiding adults and educators themselves to become more culturally responsive and connected to the students they serve. Please welcome the educator leader and national board certified teacher, Kenneth Smith. Welcome, Kenneth.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. We've been talking about this for a long time, so it's finally feels good to actually have it happen. Thank you.
It absolutely does, and I'm really excited because I know that we have we have been. I've been stalking you for a minute. I feel like
I
I'm
wouldn't I wouldn't
relentless.
call it stalking, but our paths cross so many times in so many ways because we're doing this work. But it's finally nice to connect with you on this platform.
It
Absolutely.
really is. Well, and I'm really glad that you're here because I think that we need this conversation, and I'm grateful that you're sharing it on this platform. So, Mr. Smith Inspires, that's your handle, and that is what you do. And I mean, for real, like I posted this show and immediately this quote came up about you and your work. So when you hear that quote and you think about what I said, what does that make you think about reflection in your own work and just what it means to you to hear someone see your work in that way?
I wrote it down about this course being a correction. I've heard many things about the course, mostly positive, um, but I've never heard it as a correction. I had to write that down because that
Mhm.
was powerful. I never thought about it in that way. In terms of the other information that you relayed, into, with this course being about culture, course being about identity, information, transformation. I've heard all those things. I embody those things, and I hope that my course does as well. But correction was powerful.
Mhm.
That hit. I'm gonna use
Mhm.
that one. I have to post that somewhere here in my office or at school in my classroom when I see my students tomorrow, because I do have the class tomorrow. I'm gonna let them know, yo, this is a correction right here. Let me add on a little bit more about what we're doing here in this space. So that just added a little bit. It sort of broadened my lens into how I think about this course, and what hip hop culture has done for me, and what I hope it's doing for my students as well.
Well, I love that and the fact that I'm glad that it's like this new layer, but I mean it is a correction, right? That's transformational work
Yeah.
that changes our lens in placing it in a place where it's healing, right? It is healing. It's the pain devourer. Um so, and you talked about, your own journey. Let's start there, right? Like, can you take us back to the period in your life where you started to realize your connections to hip hop and how it was impacting you?
So I think about this often because this is one of the reasons why I started the course. I grew up in a suburb of New York City, Spring Valley, New York, which is about 18 miles outside the Bronx. Um, and I'm a baby of the 80s. I came up in the 80s. So I'm part of that old school of hip hop. And we used to have these radio stations, 107.5 WBLS and 98.7 KISS FM. And folks that came up during that time, they know exactly what I'm talking about. They had Mr. Magic Rap Attack on BLS, and then you had Red Alert on 98.7 KISS. And they would come on about 10 o'clock at night because hip hop wasn't mainstream, it was still underground.
Mhm.
And we're talking, like I said, the early mid 80s. And they would have these rap shows. These two radio stations would compete for an audience from 10 to 12 or whatever time it went off. And I didn't know that who I was, my identity as a black boy, was invisible until I saw rappers like an LL Cool J, like a Kumo D, like a KRS-One, and they were confident, they were
Mhm.
cocky. Their voice, when they entered a space, they filled it. And I learned my history, a lot of my history, Black history, through listening to hip hop. I wasn't getting it in school. And that's powerful. It can be powerful in a positive way and a negative way, but for me, it was positive. Learning about my history, the lyrics, and then sonically, just the way that it sounded. And so I'm feeling it here, but I'm getting this intellectual stimulation as well. So I'm at a party, you're trying to talk to the young ladies, and you don't know whether you're supposed to be talking to them or taking notes for a lecture. And just having that duplicity sort of intersect was
Mhm.
powerful for me because I had never seen. And so let me be real here. We always learned about Dr. King, learned about Malcolm X, but these figures just seemed beyond human. They seemed like these towering figures that were like immortal almost. Not to negate anything they did historically, but I couldn't really connect with them the way that I saw these young black men expressing themselves with such confidence and teaching at the same time. And that was powerful for me. And I'm in middle school, elementary and middle school. And I would carry this with me, as I entered spaces, not knowing how it was impacting me. And luckily for me, I will say that the majority of it was positive in that sense. The creativity, the knowledge that was spoken, by these artists.
Mm,
Um, and I carry that with me. And it wasn't until I started to become an educator that I realized that that voice was missing. It was
mm,
just complete absence of that perspective, of that lens, of that social commentary of American life. And I started teaching history, and I'm like, something's missing here. I felt it. I didn't know what it was. So I've been thinking about the course for a long, long time. And then I finally built up the courage to put a team together of educators and students. And I proposed the course, to the county, and I wanted to make it clear that this is not a class where folks are coming in to listen to rap music. That's not what this is. And you mentioned it earlier that this is about a culture.
mm,
So, like for example, where we are now in the curriculum, it's a semesterized course. We learn about the history of rap, and we start in the Bronx in the early 70s. I mean, we could take it back to, griots in West Africa if we wanted to. But because of time constraints, and this is the discussion we had when we built the course, where do we start this course?
mm,
So the first couple of weeks, we're not even talking hip hop. We're talking the conditions in the South Bronx in the 70s. So we're talking structural and institutional racism and poverty. We're talking city planners like Robert Moses, the infamous Robert Moses, and his construction in New York City and how they decimated these neighborhoods. We're talking about Black and brown culture, Latin culture, and the creativity. We're talking about Caribbean culture, from Kool Herc to Africa Bambaataa to Grandmaster Flash, who brought these different cultures together. And hip hop is like this mixing stew in this environment that created hip hop. And so for the first couple of weeks, we're discussing those issues, right? White flight, redlining, all these things that were taking place in the Bronx, these buildings burning, insurance fraud. And students are sitting back like, wow, like what is this, right?
right.
So they come into the
They're-
class and they expect hip hop, but they're getting social commentary on American culture and history. And
mm.
it's a positive outlook because they're not expecting that. It's like a Trojan horse. They come expecting one thing and here's something else. So I love the aha moments that happen because a lot of them just don't know where the culture started. And go ahead.
No, I mean, but I'm gonna say, like, but you capture them, right? Like you grab them in that truth. It sounds like that
Yes.
often, to your point, it's not just you that didn't get history, right? A lot of our kids don't get real history of what's going on in the world before them and now, right? Like, and so you're breaking it down, which is huge and powerful. And you talk so much about the idea of culture. I want to know, how do you break down what culture is in such a dynamic and expansive way to kids?
First, you ask them, do you have culture? What
Mm,
culture are you from? So it's very personal. I always hold a mirror up to them so that they can look at themselves and see themselves. Um, and so I'll ask, what is culture? We look at material aspects of culture, and then just the idea of what culture is. So what's non-material, what's material culture? What culture do you see around you? And where I teach the very diverse school, I teach at Montgomery Blair High School, and we have about 160 something languages spoken in our school. We have a school of about 3,000 students, and where we are in Silver Spring, it's extremely diverse culturally, racially, socioeconomically. The only place where I think we tend to lean left ideologically or politically, but outside of that, we're an extremely diverse building and dynamic. And so I ask students to think about their cultures, and they love to talk about their cultures, everything from the foods they eat, from why their parents came here, what it means to be an American or not fit in being an American.
mm,
And then we look at hip hop culture, the different elements of hip hop culture. And hip hop has four or five, we study five main elements of hip hop culture. Um, and then we just break it down slowly, but they're always asked to look at themselves and why are you in this class? Why are you what's your connection to the culture? That's one of the first lessons we do. What's your connection to the culture? Some are knee deep, they're hip hop heads.
Mm.
Others don't know a thing about it, but they're just curious. So we have a mixed bag, but everybody comes into the room with culture. And we stop and we talk about, what culture are you from? How do you know you have culture? Give me some elements of your culture. And when they begin talking about themselves, then I turn it around and they take the mirror away and they look through a window. And then we begin to look at hip hop culture and what are the elements of the culture. So by that time, they're hooked because they see themselves centered in what it is we're about to talk about. And we move forward from there.
Wow. That breakdown though of how to connect them first to like they've got the knowledge themselves, right? Like that idea of empowerment in recognizing that they know so much about culture. They just don't, to your point, like I think that invisibleness of it, right? Like that it's not always seen until we name it. Like thinking about your own experience, right? um, and where it fits. So, you talk about it for yourself, and a lot of it was knowledge building and becoming a thinker, right? Like thinking about understanding and knowing things. When you think about how you see it impacting your students now, where does that understanding of starting to be a critical thinker start to come into your classroom and the way that you're approaching all of this?
So the theoretical underpinnings of the class, it's rooted in culturally responsive pedagogy, starting with this idea, of Paulo Freire, the Brazilian educator, and realizing that these students don't enter the room as these blank slates. They come with information. They are bodies of knowledge that ought to be respected. And so as an adult, I have to learn to share power, right? And
Mm,
what that means is I realize that they're coming into the classroom with bodies of knowledge, with information that they can teach me. And they do. Because the current hip hop is not necessarily the hip hop that I listen to, but I respect it. And so we think critically, and we talk about what critical thinking is. We talk about metacognition, and I get this from KRS-One. I didn't know what meta thinking was until KRS-One had a book talking about metacognition. This idea of thinking about thinking. Let's stop
mm,
and think about what it is you're listening to. Let's just pause, no judgment. Give me your top three, give me your top five hip hop artists for those that listen to hip hop. What is it about this content that you like? Is it just that you like it sonically? Is it the lyrics? Is it the artist? What's your connection to this music, right? To the culture? And we get into that conversation. But when you take what it is they bring into the classroom, and I call it the bully pulpit sometimes, the teacher, because I can control the flow of the class, that we can stop and pause. Put your phones down. This is not a TikTok message. This is not going to happen in 30 seconds or 15 seconds. I want you to really think about what it is that you're listening to and why you're listening to it.
mm,
And I tell them my connection to the culture and how I became connected to the culture and fell in love with it. But their first writing assignment is for them to think about their connection to the culture, number one. And number two, if they're not connected to the culture, why is it such a global phenomenon, right?
mm,
Why do so many other folks connect to it globally? So they have to address it in one way, shape, or form. And then they have to reflect on their writing. We discuss, but that gets them to begin thinking critically. They're looking at different pieces and they're analyzing it, putting it together, and then they're feeding it to each other and we're talking about what's happening. So I think the process of critical thinking, you have to first slow things down,
mm.
force them to look at what it is that we're doing, and then we can continue to move on from there. But I mean, critical thinking is it's essential to what we do. It's not just critical thinking, but it's creative thinking. That's the other side of the coin. Critical and creative
And
thinking.
creative, which is, I mean, the depth of where you can go when you combine those two pieces, right?
Absolutely.
Because now it's you looking at things in a metacognitive way, breaking things apart, examining it, but also bringing your own sense of who you are and your creativity to it, and that's powerful for kids. I have to say, I've never heard metacognition and KRS-One spoken in the same sentence as an
Yeah,
educator who we throw that term around often, but
yeah,
that connection, like, just blew my mind. I was like, "Alright, okay, that makes sense."
absolutely.
But definitely not something I thought of before. So, you talk about how you created this course because you realized there was a need for it. But let's go back a little bit. And I want to know, like, in your start of education, how do you think, though, that you've brought in a lot of elements of this just naturally in the way you approach education? I think I saw a comment in here from Dr. Howard, our colleague, about you being a master teacher, right? That national board certified, but it's more than that. It's the heart of where you come from in education. So, and you've held that obviously, like from your own experience. What were you really intentional about walking into the classroom um, when you first started, or really when it started to hit you? Maybe it wasn't when you first started. Or-
So, so teaching is a second career for me. I used to work after graduate school. I went back home to New York, and I worked in the Brooklyn District Attorney's Office for a couple of years as a research assistant, and I absolutely hated it. I could not stand. I was crunching numbers, a lot of statistics, but what happened was I started to, after work, I would volunteer at this place called The Door, which still exists. It's in Lower Manhattan off the Avenue of the Americas. It was like um, an alternative, like a community center almost. But I started preparing folks that had left high school, preparing them for their GED. And I just fell in love with these kids. That's when the light bulb went off. Like, this is where I need to be. And so when I got married, I moved down here to the DMV, to Maryland, and I got into education. I never looked back. And I know I'm fortunate. I am blessed to be in a position to do something that I love doing, that I wake up every day and I'm thankful that I have an opportunity to do this. Not everybody can say that. And I realize that. And so what I bring to the classroom, I think, is my culture. I identify as African American, just being very communal, realizing that it's not just about me, it's about we, all of us that are in the classroom together. We're sharing information, we're building from one another. And what's interesting to me, which I find funny, is that for years I was always teaching from my cultural lens. I brought who I was into the classroom. I never knew that there was academic language, something called culture responsive pedagogy,
Mhm.
that existed. It wasn't until I was 10 years in till I realized there's academic language for this. People study this,
Right.
but this is who I've always been. And once I found out that there was a body of knowledge, of intellectual and academic knowledge about this lens, this way of teaching, I was at home. And I just never thought I would feel more at home until I dove into this culture responsive pedagogy, or teaching, whichever you want to call it, in this way. So it's something that I've always done. And I see that with a lot of teachers of color when they bring their culture into the classroom and they teach from that perspective. And it's not always about me standing in front of the room as the know it all. Desks are aligned in rows, which I can't stand that formation, but I get it.
Mhm.
It's traditional. Um, and so at that point, I realized that my culture is important. And that was the way that I saw myself as an educator as well. And that there is something unique about stepping into a system that is not designed for my way of teaching.
Mhm. Mm.
And so when you talked about this being a correction, like, I'm at another level now. I'm at another level now. Just that one word, because whoever said that, they knew exactly what they were talking about. And that's a big picture lens looking at education. When you look at a course like this as a correction,
Absolutely.
you know?
Absolutely. And so and I mean, again, I think you said it. I see my culture, right? Like I get to live my culture, but you get to now also create that space for kids. kids get to say that same thing, right? Like that's powerful and huge. And I think a lot of places, things that a lot of educators are struggling to create. You mentioned culture responsive teaching, and yes, there are many educators, and I see y'all in the chat, so I'm going to give you a shout out first. I see many of my educator friends in the chat here. Welcome. Several of your Bond colleagues. I see Damon Harris, also a former guest, combining critical and creative thinking, and Dr. Daryl Howard stated just like a master teacher. Absolutely. Also, former guest, right? Kenneth M. Smith. When students' voices, communities, and cultures are centered, engagement naturally follows.
That's powerful.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. And yes, Logic says super powerful. I would agree. Mr. Jones, yes, super powerful. Welcome, Mr. Jones. Welcome to everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. So, Kenneth,
Yes.
because not everybody here who's going to be watching and is watching right now are educators, tell us a little bit more about when you break down the idea of culture responsive teaching. If you could give me an elevator speech, what is culture responsive teaching so that we are all on the same page in language here?
Yeah. So culturally responsive teaching is the idea that all of our students matter, that we look at different cultures and we make sure that other cultures can see themselves. Our educational system is set up very middle class and Western. I, the individual, being culture responsive, understands that it's me, we, and the collective. And that sort of flips the head on the way that we approach education, that we realize that there are other bodies of knowledge that are important than just the traditional ones that have been taught, not to erase what's there, but to appreciate other perspectives. And being culture responsive means being more inclusive of those who don't fit into the traditional mold of a student or within our educational system. It's broadening the lens on how we teach and how we approach education.
I love that. And I do think it also aligns with the idea of a correction because the truth is, things have not been developed for all of our students. Our
Right.
schools are broken down and working for a lot of it. Really, they were created for white men, right? Like white boys, and not for everyone else. And so that correction of culture responsive teaching is definitely really important. And Damon Harris says, do the kids see how when all of you brings your cultures together as you study culture, you create a new shared culture? That's a great question.
Great question. And allowing students to produce their own knowledge is something that's also extremely important, because what we tend to have with our school system is that students take a test, they write an essay, they write a paper, and it's for the teacher to evaluate. But with hip hop culture in this class, and the way I teach my other courses as well, I want my students to produce their own knowledge and put it out there to the world. Yes, I have to assess. Yes, I have to grade. All right, I'm not fighting that battle. But I do want them, and I encourage them. This is where the creativity comes in, for them to come in realizing that what they bring to the table is important. Listen to what it is that we're talking about, the new information that I bring to them, and create something new with that. And then share it with your students. And that's the authentic assessment. And that authentic assessment is powerful. Just to change lanes a little bit, you've done work, Damon, Daryl, the ones that are on here now, with MSP, the Minority Scholars Program.
Mhm.
And this is a program where it's a student-run program. And we as the adults, we serve as the guardrails. They create their knowledge and put it out there in the world. And they realize that what they learn, when they see themselves, when belonging is central, that they have power to make change as well. And hip hop culture has done that for me. Look at what these, and I heard Mos Def, he goes by Yasin Bey now. He made a statement that hip hop is a synonym for Black men. That hit home when I heard him say that.
Mm.
And not that this class is for Black boys or Black men, it's for everybody, because as we know, hip hop is global. But to see oneself, not just musically, but also as a Black man leading an intellectual environment, that's powerful for a lot of them. And I've had many of my males, my Black and Latino males especially, who come up to me at some point, and because I'm teaching a course, they'll take a course. Not just the hip hop course, my sociology course, my AP African American course. They'll take it just because I'm teaching it. and I teach sociology as well. And they'll take the course not knowing a damn thing about sociology, but they'll sign up because
But
Mr. Smith is taking it.
because that's the power of inspiration, right? That's the power of what you're doing to, again, and I want to elevate this because I think this is really important. A lot of times gets lost in culture responsive teaching when people talk about it or think they know about it is intellectual rigor.
Absolutely.
You are pushing kids to think and create and write and in such a dynamic way that it really is ownership of their knowledge, of the culture they're creating, of learning, all of those pieces. And I love that you brought up the MSP, Minority Scholars Program. I actually just went to the film festival. To your point, right? Like the students created an anti-racist films that were amazing and powerful to create change, right? And you're creating a lot of these guardrails. I want to come to what you were saying about that synonym for Black men and the fact that there's such an impact on Black and Latino boys. What are some of the things that you have learned from your students in even just identity that maybe you yourself didn't realize prior to teaching this course? There's some ahas you had, some moments where your students really pushed you in your own understanding of identity.
First and foremost, it was to be quiet and listen to them and not judge them. And I also realized and I was just checked the other day, a couple of weeks ago, that a lot of our boys, um, to the title of your show, are in pain. Uh,
Mm,
they can't express themselves. They can't express their full humanity. And I've had many side conversations. And now what we're doing, we're also developing another unit for the course, hip hop and mental health, because with this generation,
yes.
um, a lot of hip hop artists, especially my age, the old heads, they're starting to talk about mental health issues. A lot
Mhm.
of the younger artists are very open about their mental health challenges. And so I'm learning as an adult to just be quiet and to listen to them without judgment. I think that we as adults sometimes feel like we have to stand on a soapbox and solve the problems and tell students what they need to do instead of just receiving their message and realizing that what they're going through is nothing new, but can we help them put this language, this pain, this frustration in both an academic perspective, but also personal. And so for me, I'm learning to just be a much better listener,
Mm,
not judge what it is that they're going to and the way that they want to express themselves.
mm,
And I'll say this, we live in an environment where we're all exposed to, racism and sexism, et cetera, and we embody that without knowing it. So, for example, I'm walking down the hall, I'll see a group of Black and brown boys loud and just boisterous and animated. And I want to ask them, what are you doing? What are you up to? But then I see a group of Asian boys and they're loud and laughing, and I walk right past them and not think twice. I'm a
mm.
Black man saying this. And I was once those Black boys in high school, just as loud and rambunctious. And I realized that I'm impacted by this environment as well, all the stereotypes, all the messages that are spoken about them. So when they come into my classroom, the same way, full of life, full of energy, I have to just sit back and listen to them.
But you see their humanity and you give them
Absolutely.
space and allow them to have it.
Absolutely.
And so I want to go back because this mental health course one sounds amazing, but I would a lot of my guests who are Black men who come on the show, we talk about mental health, but there's always a lot of stigma, particularly in the older generations, right? So I think for younger kids now, it seems like the language of mental health is so much more common, so much more pervasive. Like it's not as much of a taboo for young people, but for you in that transition of thinking of mental health and thinking about where it fits within the conversation of males and mental health as Black males, like was there anything you had to kind of work through yourself or process differently to recognize like it's okay to talk about that openly?
I'm still struggling with that. I am. I'm still struggling with that. As much as I know that I would like to talk about certain issues, I still don't feel as comfortable as I would like to. But I tell you what, I have one thing I am very proud of personally is that I've built a community of other men where, Daryl and Damon, they're part of this group as well, my bond brothers, where we get together and we just have these conversations. We call it barbershop talk. And we are allowed to be ourselves and to express ourselves. I can remember when we were going through the pandemic with the George Floyd, all that situation that was happening, and we were all in quarantine. I just remember we would have these Zoom calls, and it was just so powerful to see all these faces, these black and brown men on the screen. And sometimes it would just be a moment of silence. We didn't have to say anything. We knew what we were feeling. But they were powerful moments. And our boys need that as well. And I try to provide that space for them. And so I'm still learning. I'm still trying to become more comfortable with expressing myself in ways that traditionally have not been allowed to do. So it's very comforting for me when I see someone like Method Man or Fat Joe, or even Jay-Z, his album 444, talk about going to therapy and what it's done for them. And you can hear it in their lyrics here and there, but they talk openly about it. And that's comforting for me, because if they can do it and say this in front of millions or 2 million, then why can't I? I'm a work in progress.
I appreciate that vulnerability and honesty, though, because I think that we all are in different things, right? And so that growth space for mental health, and you mentioned it, like you're making intentional strides to create those environments, right, for yourself to be able to break through that. And when you think about the impact, though, of this on young boys and school, right, to be able to understand, and you said a space where you're allowed to be yourself and express yourself. What's the power of that for young boys in school?
I don't know how to measure it. I can tell you what I feel, what I've seen. But again, I think that comes from Western culture. We're always trying to measure something quantitatively. And this is something that can't be measured quantitatively, at least from my perspective. I'll give you a perfect example. I have a guest speaker that comes in from time to time, Tim Jones. This guy is phenomenal. It's always my favorite guest speaker. And he would come in, Tim, he's my age, he's from Brooklyn, but he lives down here. And my students absolutely positively love him. When he enters a space, he sets the tone that it's okay to be who you are. Now, my students have been with me. They know me. We have a relationship. But when he comes into the room, he establishes that relationship immediately. And I had a young man, I'll just use his first name, Brian, graduated a couple of years ago, hip hop artist. And his lyrics are very aggressive, very violent, right? And he rapped in front of the class with Tim there. Tim gave him some feedback. And then after class, he wouldn't let go of Tim, just had Tim cornered. And he was talking about how he was on edge, thinking, having ideation, suicidal ideation about certain things in his life, and that his lyrics, it's cathartic for him. I'm using the word cathartic. It was cathartic for him to put things on paper. And I realized that many artists, when they write, it's cathartic for them. And I listen to a lot of the old school lyrics, and I'm realizing that writing process, going in the studio and getting it out there, it's a release for them, right? This was their therapy. And now what I'm trying to do as we build this new unit on mental health and hip hop, I want to introduce the academic, the medical language to help my students process some of what they're going through. We're still in the works. I'm talking to friends of mine that are therapists to help me with the language, because this is not my wheelhouse. And I also have to realize that this is very delicate information, to deal with. So I'm walking on eggshells as we're approaching this new unit. But I think it's important, and I'm learning myself. I'm holding a mirror up to myself as I'm designing this course, this lesson rather, to add to this course. But I'm kind of playing around with it.
Well, I can't wait to hear about this course. I think this is one of the places, I mean, for
It's going to
me,
be a unit within the course. It's going to be
I
another unit.
I love that, and I love that. I mean, mental health is is where so important to me. It is what I talk about all the time, right?
Yeah,
Is this
yeah,
idea of healing, and yeah, to your point, like I think you said it right. The power of this is catharsis. It is the ability, and sometimes it's lyrics, and sometimes it's just writing, right? Like I know from as a writer myself, that is catharsis in just getting your ideas out, and there truly is a healing process in that, in releasing it from your body, from your mind onto paper. You disconnect yourself from the emotional aspect of it to some extent. So it
yeah.
takes it away, right? Um, and then you did mention the trust and the safety, right? So it allows for young boys to feel that they can be vulnerable, they can be open, and that could be in emotional feelings of mental health, but it also may be in like risk taking in academics, right? Like there's a lot of layers to that, right? That I'm hearing coming out of this, right? There's an opportunity for so much empowerment as students, and that they can take to other spaces with what they're experiencing in this space with you.
And it's funny you should talk about risk taking in academia. And this course is risky. It was risky for me to propose it. I was happy that it was accepted, as a course of study. And I guess because I've been doing it long enough, I feel very comfortable, in my skin, because hip hop can be volatile. It can be in your face. And we do get into some topics where we're on the edge, but it's kept very professional. But we do get into some topics that hip hop delves into. And so 2 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, this was so dope. We did this. We had a listening party. There's an artist by the name of J. Cole. J. Cole dropped his
Mhm.
album. And we had a listening party. And the listening party took place during lunch. We had this hour-long lunch with both adults and students. And so we listened to a few tracks and then we discussed them. And it wasn't teacher up here talking down to the students. There was a level playing field. And we went back and forth on things that we liked, things that we didn't like, students to teacher, teacher to student. But it was so powerful to see these students come alive. And 3 of them came up to me afterwards because they had never been in a conversation with adults where they felt like they were on the same level.
Mm.
And some of my colleagues said that was powerful as well, that we could talk with students in this way and just talk openly, right? But what's important there is that hip hop was able to bridge this gap between generations.
Mm.
And
Mhm.
that's something I think hip hop has done. There are divisions as well. You hear old school hip hop heads talk about the new hip hop and how they don't like it and back and forth. But I'm not there for clickbait. I'm there to slow things down, like I mentioned at the top of the hour, and let's have these open conversations. We do this. I do this fun thing with my students where I ask them I'll say, artists that Mr. Smith isn't listening to, but probably should be. And so what they do is they write down their top 3 or 5 and
Mhm.
rap that they're listening to right now that they know I'm not listening to. Then I put them in groups, and then within their groups, they have to come up with 2 or 3 artists that I should be listening to. Then they have to come up with 3 songs that I should listen to. And they give me their list. They have these great, you should be listening to so-and-so, so-and-so. They give me their final list. I make my playlist, and I listen to what they give me. And it's painful. It's painful to listen to it, but I don't judge. Some of it is really good stuff.
What was the Have you been introduced to something that you wouldn't have otherwise listened
Oh,
to because of
absolutely.
it?
They give me stuff that I would have never listened to, wouldn't know about. And some of it is
Mhm.
really good, but some of it is painful to listen to.
Mhm.
But I come back
Mm.
into the classroom after I've listened to it, and we have something called a 5 mic rating. Five mics comes from this magazine called The Source back in the 90s. Anyway, we rated on a 5 mic scale,
Mhm.
and I give them my rating, what I thought about the music. Not judging, not looking down, but we have a conversation, and they're great conversations. Right.
Mhm.
They'll come back for lunch and we'll just continue the conversation. But it gives them a chance and me a chance to get to know them on a deeper level.
Mm.
So I think hip hop not only bridges cultures, but it bridges generations. If we as adults would not stand on our soapbox and talk down to who they are, what they listen to, just receive it. Because when I was young, when I was growing up, my coaches, my adults couldn't stand hip hop. You listen to that, it was relatively new. You listen
Mhm,
to that crap,
mhm.
this is horrible. It's just a fad. It's here today, gone tomorrow. Wrong, clearly. So I wouldn't do it to them.
But every generation, right, we have to learn and understand the next generation because it's not the same. We can't expect the same things. We can't expect the same stories or experiences or perspectives. There's learning for us in every point, and you make it. And I think this comes back to Damon's conversation and comment on shared culture, right? That is a really like shared power, shared culture. All of it came together in this moment of you all listening to J. Cole and having the conversation, and then this element of even just the student sharing music with you,
Right.
right? And I love all of that, but I want to come back to because you mentioned that this course was not like you took a risk in introducing it. Um, Tell me a little bit about that, like those decisions made because when you're writing something that can is for many other people looking at it being like, where does this fit? Why is this important? Right? What are the things you had to get through or the challenges that you were up against in the process of actually making this vision come to life?
So the process in getting a course like this approved, is that what you're asking?
It's your own process, the whole thing from like what were some of the challenges for you? What did you have to work through?
So personally, I had to work through, and it took me years to get over this. Would this be accepted as a legitimate academic course of study?
Mm.
And as much as I love hip hop culture, as much as it did for me as an intellectual, as an educator, I still questioned, is this a viable course of study? And it wasn't until I heard from students that really pushed me over the ledge to just go ahead and make this thing happen. And what I would do before it was an actual course, I would always throw some hip hop and some of the other courses I taught, US government, US history, whatever. And one day I had something on the board. In one of my previous classes, I was teaching something about hip hop. I left it on the board. Other students came in for the next class. What is that? What are y'all learning about? Why is that on the board? And so I started to keep things on the board when we talked about hip hop. And it never failed that students would come in the next class. How come we're not learning this? What? And so I got up the nerve. I put a team of adults together. You know, Daryl was on that team as well, and students wrote the proposal. They helped design the course, and it went up the ladder to central office, then to the Board of Education. They approved it, and it did face some headwinds. You know, it did face some headwinds. But I always say hip hop has always faced social headwinds. You know,
Mhm,
hip hop comes from the mud. It comes from the gutter. It's always had to fight. So that was
mhm.
nothing new. And I realized that, you know, while hip hop was being taught, hundreds of courses are being taught at the university level all around the world. But at the K through 12 level or high school level, at the time when this course was designed, I found two teachers teaching a course at the high school level nationwide. They were both in California
Only 2.
that I found.
Wow.
Both of these teachers were in California. One was in Northern California in the Bay Area, one was down in LA, and they thought they were the only ones teaching it. Right? And so
Wow.
they helped me sort of, you know, also muster up the courage. You got to do this. You got to get it done. You know, not all my students are going to college to take a college course on hip hop. You know, and some are doing it right now. I have students in my class producing music, right? Who are
Mhm,
rappers, who have stuff up on Spotify, who have videos, who know more about the music production part than I do. And I've
mhm.
had a student who has albums on Spotify. He taught a class on how he samples. So we shared a lesson. He came to me and we designed a lesson together where he talked about his process in finding samples, how he produces music, and then he, you know, helped me teach a course on it. He took half of it, I took the other half. It was really cool. It was really cool to do that.
I love that. I mean, and again, how powerful to have your students come back to bring their own, like
Absolutely.
they are business people, they are
Yeah,
entrepreneurs themselves, right?
yeah,
And this is just another lens to deepen that,
yeah.
and that questioning our validity, right? Like the validity of a course. Then you work through that, and I feel like now the next step that you're taking, and not next step, but you've been doing this alongside, right, is also a lot of teacher education and leadership development components, right? So let's shift into that because I want to know a little bit more about how are you approaching the development of other educators
In
now?
terms of this course
In
specifically,
I think in terms of the craft culture responsive teaching, like how are you approaching it? What are the elements of it that have been important for you to help other educators to understand better?
yeah, but I'll tell you, it's funny with this course. It's also taught at BCC High School,
Mhm.
Northwood High School, and the two teachers that are teaching it there, they are phenomenal as well. Um, but one of the major barriers in this course growing to other schools is finding the right people to teach it.
Mm.
Um, and I did a presentation to an up county school a few years ago, and they say, Mr. Smith, I feel your passion for this course, but to be honest, we don't have anybody here that can teach that course.
Mm.
And I get it, and I say all that to say that there's another hip hop course that was designed by Dr. John Howard, who is also a bond member. And while mine is history, his is more ELA. His is more English. I mean, history. I mean, hip hop as literature. So his course, he just
Mm.
ran his first course this year, and we're always planning together. He's at Blair as well, and we're always talking about what kind of teacher training do we need to do to teach this course properly, because it can go left quickly if it's not done correctly. It
Right.
can go left quickly. We understand that. And so we're talking about, along with the mental health piece, we're talking about what does teacher training look like to teach this course, both from his perspective, the ELA, and then my perspective, which is historical and sociological. So we're working on that. And we want to do this possibly, with Bond, the things that we do with Bond. For folks that don't know what Bond is, building our network of diversity. So we're an organization where we recruit, retain, and we build men of color within the classroom. So with teaching and all the way up through leadership, we do workshops for teachers in terms of how do you present at conferences, how do you build your own knowledge. We have the barbershop talk to lend support, to empower, and that's also a component of what we do. But to try to teach educators to teach this course, but also to be culturally responsive in other courses and the way that they teach is
Mhm.
central to what I believe in. I do believe in teacher leadership. Love the classroom. I will retire in the classroom, but I also have one leg outside the classroom, working with organizations like Bond, like MSP, and doing the hip hop thing as well.
That's important work though, because again, like you are one person, right? And you've got it in two other schools, I know, but like that extending and building capacity of more people understanding and knowing how to do this work, whether it's in this course or in other courses, right?
Yeah,
Like I think what you're naming, a lot of these elements are just really strong, important, responsive characteristics of educators who want to shift the culture of school and their classrooms. So people are taking that away. You talked about Bond, and I want to give you a moment because there is actually, and this is kind of a connection to all the things, right? Bond is having an academy coming up in April, and the focus is mental health. Is it?
yes, yes. It's well-being of educators, mental health, well-being, both mental and physical. How do we take care of ourselves to do the work that we're doing, especially in this environment that we're in? The way the administration is just dismantling education. How do we
Mhm.
take care of ourselves? So I'm excited about the academy. Always looking forward to it. It's always an exciting time for us to build as educators, not just as Black and brown men, but all educators, period, who come to the academy. We're looking forward to it at Bowie State.
I love that. Do you want to end the date? Anybody have any information about
April
how people
24th
sign
and
up?
25th. Let me make sure I got that right. Yep,
I'm gonna give
April
you the
24th.
extra plug here.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So April 24th, 25th, and 26th, the Bond Academy, which will be held at Bowie State. look at bondeducators.org or thebondproject.org, thebondproject.org, and you can find all the information there. It's a really dynamic academy, and what is really unique about what we're doing is that every workshop, every presentation is led or co-facilitated by a Black or brown male. And we thought that that was very important because people really need to see us produce, present, create our own knowledge.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So if you please go and check it out. The Bond Academy is an amazing space. And I'm very excited because this is my first time doing a session co-facilitated with a Black man, Mr. Charles Alexander himself.
Good for you. Good for
Yes,
you.
it's going to be a panel conversation. So make sure, tune in, come and attend, and you'll see so many amazing, brilliant educators and leaders. I always walk away with so much knowledge and tools and things. And it's just really, I love to see a space where so many men just are connected and at ease and just see each other together. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing to witness.
Yes,
It really, really is. So, when you think about just your classes and when students leave your classroom years from now, what are you hoping that they remember? Some lesson about themselves, their potential, anything that you feel like you want them to walk away years from now reflecting on from being in this course and in this space with you?
I want them to know that they matter, that they belong, they have something to offer. And the last thing I want to say, which still blows my mind, is that when you look at some of these old head hip hop artists, Queen Latifah, Rakim, Nas, Jay, they were their age. They were creating. That still blows my mind. I'm still reflecting on, Nas's first work, Rakim. They were 16, 17, 18 when they were writing this material. That's mind blowing. Nas dropped out of school in the 9th grade. One of the greatest artists of all time. With the blessing of his father, he left, never went to 9th grade. Because his father understood that educational system was not built for that Black boy. And that still blows my mind, right? Biggie, Jay, they didn't finish high school in the traditional, because the system was not set up for them, for that creativity, for that brilliance. I want to tap into that. And I just want them to realize that they matter, they belong, and that what they have to offer is valuable.
That's important. That's powerful, right? And to your point, right, the system was not created for them. So you are transforming that in a space where they walk into a classroom that has been, with a lot of intention, with a lot of effort. I mean, between just your course development, but it's the pedagogy too. It's the way you're instructing. It's the way you built these authentic relationships to create the space. And to your point, right, the right person has to teach this class because it is so much more than just a syllabus of information.
Yeah. Absolutely.
You have to show up in a certain way and a belief system. And it sounds like as an educator, you have to shift a lot of your own beliefs to do this the right way, authentically for kids.
Yes, absolutely. Well said. Well said. Couldn't have said it better myself.
So thank you so much. Like, this has been such a cool conversation. I really appreciate it. I think I've learned so much about the course. Like, I just want to be a fly on the wall now. Like, I need to just sit in the class and experience it. It feels like that's what it is. It's a whole experience in and of itself. And I mean, just so that, you have a moment, how do people follow you? Are there any other projects, any other things coming up, new courses, any other ones that you want to talk about?
So you can follow me Instagram, Mr. Smith Inspires. I don't know if you could provide my email address, my personal email address. That would be fine as well. ks.mccaslin, MCCASLIN at Gmail. Those are ways to get in contact with me. And in terms of plans, we do have some plans to expand the course. Like I said, the mental health portion is coming up, and we have some other things. partnerships we're trying to do with local universities that have hip hop courses and curriculums as well. So we're trying to grow and expand um, in various ways.
I love it, and we're here for it. We can't wait to see what the expansion is going to continue to be. Make sure that you all check out all the links below where you'll see the links and connections to everything that Kenneth mentioned, as well as the Bond Academy information. And follow him on Instagram, Mr. Smith Inspires. Follow me. I am Brown Girl Interrupting. So if you are watching me for the first time, make sure that you subscribe to this show, you like, you hit the bell so that you tune in every Sunday at 8 p.m. for these conversations on turning our pain into our power and our struggles into our strengths. And follow me. I am writing on Substack. I have the show on YouTube. I have all my social media, TikTok, everything Brown Girl Interrupting. Thank you so much, Kenny. Like, this was an amazing
Thank you.
conversation. I know there are so many educators and non-educators that are walking away with tools and ideas of what do we need to do differently to empower our youth.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you for the platform.
Thank you. And thank you to the iRant Network and to everybody who just showed up in the chat, who shared, from my Bond family to my iRant family. Thank you, and have an amazing evening. Peace, love, and light.
Good night.